Money is such an important tool for society and humanity that if you mess with it, it has downstream effects on so much. Our money, at the base layer, it's stealing from us. Bitcoin is a more moral, fair foundation for our money. Do you want to work for a money that another man can print out of thin air? But we all do. This is a new monetary paradigm shift happening. Everything is changing. Nations are losing trust in the US dollar. No one knows what the heck they're doing. Bitcoin is already separating itself from everything else. That's why it's super bullish right now. So gold is sniffing that out. Bitcoin is going to completely outperform it, where it goes crazy parabolic. I can't bring myself to buy gold because Bitcoin is just better than it in every single way. That's why you just keep stacking.
Adam, what is your favorite thing about Bitcoin?
When I started learning about it, it was definitely the...
All right, Hurley, how's it going, man? Thanks so much for being here.
Awesome to be here, John. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan. So Adam Hurlburt. So people on YouTube might recognize you. You do the Swan pure Bitcoin signal videos twice a week on the Swan Bitcoin channel on YouTube, and they're awesome. So I really appreciate you taking the time to be here. Thanks so much.
Hey, man, thank you for the kind words. Yeah, it's fun to do it. So I'm glad you enjoy it. I'm glad you get some value out of it.
Yeah, if anyone hasn't seen those, check him out. He's delivering super high signal. I would say if you want to keep up on like what's going on in Bitcoin and get macro like signal, like really strong, really compelling, good Bitcoin stuff, but also know what's going on in the day-to-day, week-to-week, it's like basically my favorite source for that. So that's enough of me blowing smoke. We'll get into a little bit more of that stuff later, but I got to ask you the first question, because it's the name of the channel. Adam, what is your favorite thing about Bitcoin?
Yeah, honestly, it's definitely it's funny because originally when I went down the rabbit hole, this is what drew me, even if I didn't know it at the time. It was, obviously number go up was the most, kind of like moth to flame attractive thing about it. But when I started learning about it, it was definitely the moral aspect of Bitcoin as money. Because I realized when I went down the rabbit hole pretty early on that I thought I knew what money was, but I really didn't know what money was. And I think that's true for, just speaking about the normal people in my life that I've tried to orange pill. If you told them they didn't understand money, they'd probably get offended. They're like, well, of course I know what money is. It's an abstraction of, everyone has like an idea of what it is, but as any Bitcoiner knows, you go deep down the rabbit hole and you're really learning about, the history of money, why money has evolved the way it has, why we're using the current money that we have, and why that's very different from other money in a lot of negative ways. So I think it's just the drilling into the fact that Bitcoin is a tool, it's money, but it has a more moral, fair. It's like more morally fair at the foundation. Right. So, and that's super important because I can't remember. I saw a clip somewhere where someone was just saying, I think it might've been that comedian. I can't remember his name, but he was saying, money is such an important tool for society and humanity that if you mess with it, in any negative way, it has, downstream, and Bitcoiners know this obviously, so I might be preaching to the choir, but it has downstream effects on so much. Right. And I think that's what a lot of people that don't understand Bitcoin don't see, is they don't see that, it's like this money is almost like this thing, this abstraction in the background that we know we have to have for certain reasons, even if they don't really know why it's so important for humanity as a tool. But it's like they don't fully understand the depths of how far apart our current money has come from what money should be, especially even just like the properties of what gold was and for thousands of years and how, anyway. So it's to answer that question in a succinct way, I've kind of gone all over the place, but it's Bitcoin is moral, as a more moral foundation for our money, which is hugely important.
That's why we sound like psychos as Bitcoiners sometimes, because we always are taking all the externalities of society and everything we see negative in society, and we're pointing it back to like, well, Bitcoin fixes this, or like that's the problem of the money, right?
It's kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing now, I remember there was a point early on in my career, I was like, oh my gosh, Bitcoin does fix everything. Like, I actually got to the point where I was like, it just is going to fix everything. But it's like, with the further you go down, the further you learn about it, you realize that it's not going to fix everything. I definitely think that, and I think Bitcoiners know that when they say Bitcoin fixes it or Bitcoin fixes everything, it's kind of like a tongue-in-cheek jab a little bit, like that it fixes a lot of stuff. And because we were talking about the foundation of money being broken in so many ways, and Bitcoin kind of aligning with more, just like the laws of nature and stuff like that. So it's just more in tune with reality, right?
I think Saylor's, I don't know if he ever used to say Bitcoin fixes everything, but lately I hear him saying Bitcoin doesn't fix all the world's problems. It just fixes half of them.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, because it's not going to solve human greed. It's not going to solve
Yeah.
Violence, or, I mean, a lot of people think it's going to lessen the incentive for war, which I think is legitimate. But it's not going to get rid of it completely. There's still going to be hatred. There's still going to be violence. There's still going to be war. There's still going to be differences between nations. You know what I mean? I don't necessarily think it's going to completely eliminate war, but I think when you just get down to it, it's like, and it's so funny. I tell this to so many people that don't understand Bitcoin yet, or don't fully, don't understand it at the level that me and you, or probably some of the audience does. And they just don't, just trying to tell them that our money, at the base layer, it's stealing from us, right? But it's like, it doesn't compute with them for some reason, I guess, because it's like, well, that's just what money does, maybe. I don't know. It's kind of a bizarre thing where it's like, when you really think it from first principles, like, do you want to work for a money that someone can print? Like what I think Jack Mallers says that, right? It's like, I'm not going to work for something that another man can print out of thin air, right? But we all do. And I guess it's just recency. It's just because it's normal that we just continue to just think that there's no way we can change it. It's like there's a little bit of that too, right? It's like that nihilism, thinking that we can't change the things in our lives that are so cemented, like governments and authority and money. But Bitcoin really challenges that stuff head on, right?
I do think a lot about that as well, right? Like there's a very much a fish in the fishbowl aspect of people born into a system where money is a certain way, and the Keynesian economic, kind of profligation of those ideas, right? Where I think people just take all of it as fact and as truth. And there's a weird, when you're Bitcoin and you start studying money and you start looking and going, oh, well, this whole fiat thing, it's actually not that old. It's like very new in the long history of money, right? So that's where it's like, oh, this isn't just, I was born into it, and that therefore this is the only way money works and it's the way it has to be. There's a whole like, oh, wait a second, this is a new experiment we're kind of doing as humans, and that doesn't mean it's necessarily the right answer. I mean, I did write down the fact that you, in one of your videos recently, said Bitcoin is a more ethical money, and you said it's the first truly ethical technology. I'd love to go a little deeper on like what you sort of meant by that, or what you think how you think about that.
It goes back to when you think about just technology as tools that make our lives easier, right? And I think I got struck by a comparison to something like the internet. And I think I might have brought that up in my video too, that like the internet can be used for both good and bad, as we can see in our society, right? It's had amazing benefits to our society, but it also has had negative externalities that came from it, right? Phone addiction and whatever, algorithms that kind of like game our dopamine systems, all that kind of stuff, right? So you can clearly see, it's just like anything, even just when you go as simple as something like a hammer or a gun, that can be used for good. It can be used to deter and protect people. It can be used to hurt people and kill people. So, but Bitcoin is different. And I think it might be the first, I can't think of anything else that in its base layer, like, in the code that it's written, that can't be altered by humans, on the individual or the group level. Like, these morals of, it can't be corrupted. It can't be debased. It's open to all. It's like all those levels of things that are just built right into its code. So I think from a foundational level, even though Bitcoin could still be used for evil things or for, bad things, some people unfortunately treat Bitcoin like it's, like I think you can go a little too far with the Bitcoin being going to save everyone in the world. It's going to be like, they almost treat it like it's a god or something, right? I think that's kind of dangerous levels, a little bit of thinking. It is just a tool. Like it's definitely unique, and I can see why people, when there's something that people believe in as deep as Bitcoin, it's obviously going to get humans just naturally are going to go to that level. But it's one of the first tools, technological tools that really from its base layer is rooted in, like I said, morals, and there's just thou shalt not steal. Don't steal from one another. You can't cheat it. You can't lie. You can't lie with it, right? You can't lie on a Bitcoin transaction, So I think that's pretty profound. And I don't think we've seen what that means yet for society, or not even close. And I don't know. Can you think of any other technology that has that kind of framework? Like I can't really think of it.
No, I mean, I think that's fascinating, especially if you stay specifically like a digital, right? We talk a lot about how like Bitcoin is the first instance of real digital scarcity, right? Like provable digital scarcity that cannot be changed. Not artificial digital scarcity that's like, oh, well, we have, we're a company and we print stock, we sell stock, we won't sell any more stock. Like you can change it anytime you want. Like,
yeah. That's like the Ethereum thing, right? It's like, well, now we're ultrasound money because we're going to burn the gas and but it's like, it's like, sure, that sounds great, but how can we trust your word that's going to happen? And history shows that we can't. So
Right.
that's the whole point, right? And that's why, yeah, I think you're right, and you hit the nail on the head. That like probably the most important aspect of Bitcoin being a moral money is that fixed supply, which so many people still don't really understand how that's beneficial. I feel like when you tell them, it's like it's got a totally fixed supply and no one can change that. It's like, they almost like it's almost like it warps your brain a little bit, because we're taught, like you're saying with the MMT theory thing, we're taught the opposite. That like, well, how is that going to work then? If it's totally fixed, how is that going to service the whole world? They don't understand how that can even. It's almost like you have to think of something completely outside the box of what we currently have, and it's because we were born into it, like you had said earlier too. That I think that's why people have such a hard time seeing it, because we were born into this system. We didn't choose it, and we don't. You have to look to history. The only way to look at what could be different is to look at history, and that's where the history of money comes in, right?
Well, there's a few different threads that let's pull on. Well, one was like I didn't think out this analogy like super thoughtfully, but posted a thing the other day. It was basically like, man will essentially use like nature or God's best version of the technology until we can come up with our own better version of the technology. Like we use horses for transportation and work. They were the best for thousands of years. And then we invented the car, and the horse, like basically not physically gone, but like no longer a means of transportation, right? Like over. So like we used gold. Gold was nature or God or whatever you want to call it, its best version of, a store of value, a commodity money that we could have. We used that for as long as we had it. And even though fiat sort of like, came on top of gold, gold still destroys fiat as a store of value. Like fiat is like, sort of taking over the medium of exchange purposes of gold, but not the store of value purposes. But now we as man have finally made a technology better than gold at serving those same purposes. And so it's like, if you look at the horse and the car analogy, there's a really great like old-timey black and white photos that I reposted on my Twitter. I stole it from somebody else, of like 1903, and you look at like Fifth Avenue in New York, and it's all horses and there's one car. 10 years later, it's like 1913 or whatever. The entire street, all cars and one horse. And you're like, that's how fast it flips when we finally figure out how to improve upon that technology that's been the standard for even thousands of years.
It's like the technological revolution thing where it's like the change is exponential as opposed to, and I think we've seen something like that with the internet already as well, right? I mean, it's so interesting how the internet was such a novelty thing for quite a long time, even just when I was growing up, and then it got to a point where it's like no one can even fathom a world without the internet right now, right? And I think that the same thing is going to happen with Bitcoin. And it was interesting you're talking about gold, because you're right that like gold. It was originally the original store value, which I think is the most important aspect, and I think most Bitcoiners would agree is the most important attribute of money, is its ability to store value, so we can save, right? And that's originally what gold was, right? But then it became more of a medium of exchange, and then they realized that it had its limitations as a medium of exchange. So then that's when they brought in fiat, and it almost like juiced that desire for having like a freely flowing money, and that worked for a while. It was like a slow progression, right? It's interesting to think about it from that perspective, that it's gold still from that whole time. You might say fiat is our main money, but gold has still been the premier store of value for, I mean, obviously you can think about in terms of investments, like real estate has surpassed it and stocks have surpassed it. But in terms of just like taking your value and just holding it, over time, it's been gold. So, and it's interesting that Bitcoin kind of like brings both of those together, right? It's going to hold your value, but it's also going to give you the returns of, and better than something like stocks or real estate would too, which is like, that's why I was telling a buddy of mine the other day, who I've been telling about Bitcoin for a while. And he's like, he was always like, yeah, gold, and I was like, yeah, gold, great. But for me, like once I started getting into the history of money, sound money, learning about Bitcoin, I was like, yeah, I should probably own some gold too. And I was like, yeah, I like gold. Like I think gold and Bitcoiners and gold bugs are on the same team, really, right? But I was just like, I can't bring myself to buy gold because Bitcoin is just better than it in every single way. Like it's just in my mind, I can't be like, oh, I'm gonna buy like 5% or 10% gold, and it's done really well. Like, don't get me wrong, like it's all-time high now, but Bitcoin, like the upside potential is just miles better, and it's just a better form of money in every single way.
I agree with the thing about gold bugs. Like Bitcoiners sometimes like talk smack about gold bugs, but I'm like, we are on the same team. We all agree about the same problems. And Bitcoiners or gold bugs were carrying the sound money torch before A, young, people like my age ever came around, and B, before Bitcoin came around. So like we can't, knock them too hard.
I agree.
They just now see the solution as the wrong thing. They just only thing they disagree with is what the solution is. And they're just taking a while to come around to it because this whole Bitcoin thing is new to them.
Yeah. And then certain ones give it a bad name, right? Like it's like Peter Schiff and I think of Dave Ramsey have a few that just like they, instead of being like a little bit open-minded to, okay, I can see how Bitcoin could, they're just completely like vehemently, they hate on it, right? Which, I guess that says something maybe more about human psychology.
I think with Peter Schiff is like, he's a marketer. He's doing marketing. Like he has his own like fund or company or whatever. He's selling gold. So he's doing marketing. Every time he's out there like talking about Bitcoin or whatever, everything he says is like, he's a marketer. Like it's not, that's not even his real opinions. Like it doesn't matter. He's probably neutral on the actual facts. If you got up like a couple drinks in him and sat him down at a quiet bar and promised not to repeat what he said, he'd probably be like, yeah, I don't really care. Like I'm doing marketing. Like,
and he's realized it's become a shtick too, right? Where he gets a lot of engagement for it. I'm not necessarily saying he's engagement farming, but he probably is a little bit.
Oh, he is.
He's a marketer, right?
Yeah. He's definitely engagement farming.
And I see a lot of like other accounts do stuff like that, right? Where they'll just like bash Bitcoin and it's like they just know that they're going to get like 1 million views on it or something. It's like it's a way for them to just kind of prop their account up maybe a little bit. But
yeah, well, you know how X, if you click on that person's post, X will show you the replies of all the people you follow, and all the people I follow are Bitcoiners. So all I see is all the Bitcoiners like piling up. You're like, yeah, this is what this person wanted. Like they knew what they were.
Exactly.
Yeah. You've been talking a lot on your channel and your videos recently about everything that's changing in the global macro order. And tying it into the gold thing is like, okay, the previous monetary order right now in this moment may be changing. The U.S. Treasuries as, the global reserve asset, it all might be changing.
Yeah.
And therefore, we might be heading for an era of neutral global reserve assets. And I think that would be primarily gold and Bitcoin. And gold is the global reserve asset of the past. And Bitcoin is the global reserve asset of the future. That's kind of like the thesis I feel like I'm sort of operating on. A lot of your videos are like informing that thesis. But man, I think it's just like fascinating how much seems to be changing. I mean, we could be overblowing it in not knowing exactly how things are going to turn out. But what do you think about like how everything is sort of changing at this crazy moment?
I think it's crazy. I think it's funny because Bitcoiners, just like a lot of things, I've seen this coming from a while back. Like I remember when I first got into it, they were talking about there's kind of the more conspiratorial things about like, the Great Reset and there was going to be a monetary reset because they're all, and since Bitcoiners are so studied in history as well, they see, okay, we had the monetary order of the Bretton Woods and then the removal of gold peg with the Nixon shock in 71. And it's like, there's every certain amount of time, 40, 50, 60 years, whatever it is, there seems to be some kind of reset to the monetary system, right? And you just see the writing on the wall with the debt levels. And so for a long time, I heard that and I was like, wow, yeah, that makes sense. By like probably 2030-ish, this was early on in, probably 2020. It was like by 2030-ish, could give or take a few years, there's going to be some kind of attempt to reset the monetary system to default to either whether it be the nation's default or the U.S. defaults on the debt, or they just come to a new agreement. And now it's like all coming to fruition. Everything is exactly leading to that point. So I know you said it seems like there's a new monetary order happening, but I would argue that like it's pretty clearly happening if you're paying attention, right? And even Ray Dalio today came out, and he's been saying this forever. I think Ray Dalio's been saying it for the last 5 years or so too. It's like there's a new monetary paradigm shift happening. There's everything is changing, and then the person interviewing is just like, so are we going to get a recession? And he's just like, he's trying to tell him like, no, everything is changing. You don't understand. Like the whole system is getting because people are nations are losing trust in the U.S. dollar or the ability for the U.S. dollar to stay, or the U.S. government to stay solvent. There's a whole bunch of different reasons for it. And I see the whole tariff and trade war stuff as an attempt to leverage the best position of power to negotiate a new monetary kind of, it's like the Bretton Woods too, or just like Scott Bessent was talking about. He talked about that before the election. I put that in my video on Thursday. Before the election, he was talking about how there's going to be Bretton Woods, whatever you want to call it, Bretton Woods 2, Bretton Woods 3. Some people say that Nixon taking gold, the gold peg from the dollar in 71 was another kind of Bretton Woods agreement. Even though it wasn't an agreement really, so I don't know if I agree with that. But there is another one coming, and I think that whether you call it the Mar-a-Lago Accord, there's all different terms for it, but and just it just goes to show all these tariffs that already there's a bunch of countries coming to Trump and being like, let's talk, let's come up with a new agreement, whether it's a trade agreement and I think the money is going to be thrown into that agreement whenever it does come up. Who knows when it's going to be, but the fact that we have Bitcoin during that time is wild. Like the fact that we are in it, like it almost is surreal to me that the timing of the release of Bitcoin sometimes and how it just like coincided with, like, it's like, how did it, that's why people are, I think, come to the conclusion like, oh, Satoshi was a time traveler, because it's just too perfect. Yeah. And even just like the 4 years halving cycles falling on the presidential elections, like there's so many things where you're like, man, how did he know? Like, it's something was going on with Satoshi in that or maybe it was just blind luck. I don't know, right? But you can't deny that it's incredible times that we're living in. I've got my popcorn out. It is wild. Like the last 2 or 3 years, the amount that has changed just in the world's, just the way, like the Overton window for Bitcoin has just been mind blowing since the ETFs basically were approved, or even before that, when Larry Fink announced that he wanted to do a Bitcoin ETF. And then just think about all the things that have happened in the past 2 years since that happened. It's absolutely insane. And then even just to have, I remember that when I first got into Bitcoin, my father-in-law, one of the first things, and this was one of the first things that got me thinking, he was like, well, what about governments? They're going to ban Bitcoin, right? I was like, yeah, he's right. They probably would. And that's, that was a part of early on in my journey. I'm like starting to look into, well, how can governments ban it? And obviously you learn about the game theory. But now it's like you can fast forward to now, and it's like literally the largest government in the world is advertising to everyone that this is a reserve asset. It's different from it's unique. It's different from all the other cryptos. It's a store of value. We don't want to sell it. Nations have an incentive to be first movers on holding Bitcoin as a strategic reserve. Like that's wild that we've gone that far in 5 years.
No kidding. I mean, I make content and the algorithm will push it out, to people who aren't Bitcoiners, and then you get comments, right? And one of my things is like, I would say maybe the number one, if you had to rank all the pieces of FUD for 16 years, probably the number one piece of FUD, governments are going to ban that. Governments aren't going to let it. Like, they're going to kill it. So we just had the moment where clearly, first of all, that would never work. Governments around the world all have to ban it at the exact same moment. It's never going to happen. Even if they did, it can't kill Bitcoin. So it doesn't matter. But if you really believe that, now you have, like you said, the most powerful country in the world that issues the global reserve currency, the biggest economy in the world. The government just literally fully endorsed it. So, but the fact, I don't think that most people who had that piece of FUD in mind, that didn't flip anything in their mind of, oh, for 16 years I thought government was going to ban it, and now all of a sudden they're promoting it.
Yeah.
Oh, so I'm changing my mind about it. They're just like, oh, no, now quantum computing is going to destroy it. You're like,
yeah, they'll flip it to something else. Or there's also the level of, they will flip it to quantum computing, which I've heard that's actually a pretty common one too, right?
Yeah.
But specifically the government banning thing, I wonder if there's a part of it where people have heard rumblings of this, but if you're not plugged into the Bitcoin atmosphere, like the Bitcoin space, you don't really know what's happening with that, because you're not going to see it on your feed about Trump's Bitcoin reserve thing if you don't care about Bitcoin, right? If it's not on your radar. So I wonder if there's people that have maybe heard rumblings of it, but they almost just oh, I'll believe it when I see it. And that's kind of because I even asked my buddy, I was like, well, you heard about Trump doing a Bitcoin strategic reserve, right? He was like, yeah, I heard him there was rumblings about that during the election. I'm like, well, they signed a bill. He didn't know that they had signed a bill to do it, and that they were gonna. And I think it's that thing where I think it was Steven on Swan Signal said on Friday, he's like, the buy is the signal. Once the U.S. government actually does buy it, then people are gonna be like, oh, they were serious. Just like no one believed Trump and when they were gonna do tariffs. He said the whole time in the campaign he was going to do, he's going to fix the trade imbalance. He was going to do tariffs, and no one believed him. And then he did it. And then it was so it's I think it's one of those things where people it won't show up on people's brains and their feeds until it actually happens. And then, I just feel I always feel like we're on the verge in Bitcoin of just that gradually, then suddenly. But man, how can you not think that we are so on that? We're just waiting to, it's just crazy to me that it hasn't even caught on yet. Sometimes I'm it's like that meme come to life where you're like, how do people not see this? You're the guy in the party in the corner, they don't know that Bitcoin's a strategic reserve and it's about to be adopted by nations everywhere, and there's a new monetary order and it's going to take over. That no one knows.
Yeah, I know. That's all of us for sure. We are all that meme. Yeah,
we're all that
crazy. We look crazy to the outsiders. You talked a minute ago about this whole idea that like now we have the tool. Like all this stuff that we talk about and all the problems of fiat money would be super depressing. Well, we would all be gold bugs basically, I guess. But we would just be super frustrated. Like gold's not solving it. Why gold, But now it's like for the first time in ever, we have the tool. Like we have the tool basically of separation of money and state.
Yes.
Like I'm repeating what, if anyone watched one of my previous interviews, Joe Bryan on one of my previous interviews basically said that. It's like first time we've ever actually had the tool to separate money and state.
He's awesome.
Yeah, he's awesome. Yeah, I did an interview with him. It was great. But like that's the craziest thing. Like you said about the timing of Bitcoin coming out now with all this happening. We, for the first time ever, like actually have the tool to separate money and state. Like before that, it was just a pipe dream, right? We couldn't actually do it. But now, and the fascinating thing, I don't think Trump is necessarily, like you said, gonna, do a Bretton Woods conference where they say, let's make Bitcoin the global reserve currency. Like they're not going to do that. No. But Bitcoin's kind of they can't stop it from becoming that anyways.
Yeah, it's like the game theory, right? It's like even if they, like, because I think a lot of what's becoming clear now too is that there's a take that stable coins and their embrace of stable coins is going to help keep the US dollar the medium of exchange of the world for a while, right? It's like, and I think without that, like because it's clear that there's a lot of people in the Trump cabinet that are smart with that, right? They see the demand for dollars worldwide and just the power of stable coins being the buyers of US treasuries and all that kind of stuff, right? So I do see a world now where there's going to be a transitionary period for sure. But and even if you do have, even if they come up with they're going to go back to a quasi gold standard, it doesn't matter because Bitcoin still is there and it's better than them. And so it's like the incentives will slowly start to realize that Bitcoin is outperforming everything else. And even if we live in a world where it's like the US dollar becomes the global medium of exchange and Bitcoin is the global store of value for now, that's still a much better world because the people actually have something that they can save in that isn't going to steal from them. And I think there's been a lot of talk. I know Jack Dorsey kind of sparked a little bit of a debate around if Bitcoin stays a store of value, it's failed. And I think that's like, it comes from a place, I understand where that comes from, but I think it comes from a place of impatience of these things working themselves out, which take a long time, right? Like I know Corey, the CEO of Swan, Corey Clifton talks about this a lot, where this whole process of Bitcoin becoming the dominant medium of exchange, unit of account, store of value, everything, like just taking out like hyper Bitcoinization, that is not like 5-10 years away. That's probably more like 50 years away, maybe more, maybe, who knows, maybe less, but it's a longer process, I think, than that. And so it's just, and it comes back to like the how money's monetized over time, right? It's like, that the bullish case for Bitcoin, I think with VJ said that the best is that things need to become, people need to understand that something will hold its value well before they would ever even want to use it as a money, right? So it's like, it makes sense that we're just in this stage. We're in, and maybe Bitcoiners wouldn't like to hear this, but we're in the early stages of it being accepted as a store of value, right? Like most people still don't see it as a viable, solid store of value because of its volatility or whatever reasons they have, right? But that's going to change. I would say by the time it's 20 years old, like I think by 2028, 2029, 2030, it's going to be pretty widely accepted that you cannot deny the returns of Bitcoin over the long time frame. It won't be able to be denied anymore. And it'll be like, okay, it's just like the internet took about 20 years for people to be like, oh, this isn't going away. Same thing with Bitcoin. Like we're already getting to that point where people are like, oh, Bitcoin's not going away. So that's just going to continue. And then, yeah, it's just game theory from there on, right?
Yeah, I had that on my list to sort of ask you about that because I know one of your recent videos was sort of about that, what Jack Dorsey said. And I have that as a thing I'm interested in, that idea of if Bitcoin fails as a medium of exchange, then it will fail as a store of value. I know that some people believe that. I think I agree with you that it's too early to say it's failed as anything, but some people think even if it sort of fails as a medium of exchange, if it doesn't get more adoption in the shorter term, then it will fail as a store of value. But I think I subscribe to what you're saying, which is, well, if you study commodity monies, they go through that phase of collectible first, generally, right? Which Bitcoin actually also did, had no monetary value at first. And then they go through the store of value phase. And like you said, if you think first principles about it, they would naturally have to go through store of value phase, because why would I trade in something or work to receive something if I don't believe it's a store of value first.
Exactly.
So the wider the store of value adoption becomes, then more people want to use it as a medium of exchange. So I agree that it's just sitting, we're sitting in the middle of it, and it's just hard to tell how long that's supposed to take, I guess, before we transition to more of a medium of exchange phase, I guess.
And I honestly think, even just I look at when I first got into Bitcoin, I think people that just the super bullish sentiment of Bitcoin is it like it's gonna, and I fell into this when I first got into it, that like you learn about it, you're like, oh my gosh, everyone's learning about it right now. I'm late. I don't have enough, and you just like some people make I'm lucky that I didn't make the big mistake of like leveraging everything and like selling everything and putting it in, because then I had a massive bear market to deal with. Like, everyone has that in their Bitcoin journey where they believe it, they put a bunch in it, and then they're sitting in losses for a while, right? It's like that pain that you have to go through. But so I think some people do a disservice with getting just like the over bullish sentiment, like it's going to take over as the global reserve currency in 2 years, 5 years, 3 years, whatever, right? So when I try to educate people about it, I try to just come from the point of it's a better savings technology, because that's where we are right now, right? That's the store of values. I say treat it like a savings account that's going to grow exponentially in 5-10 years. It's like that investment thesis of Bitcoin, right? That's the stage we're in right now. I would love it to be the global medium of exchange and it be just the base layer money, and we use it all the time to spend. And I think that's going to happen, but we just need to remember where we are in its phase of adoption and kind of go with that, right? And I think probably Jack Dorsey's point about that probably comes from a place of being a little bit frustrated that it's not taking off as a medium of exchange like people would have wanted it to, right? Like El Salvador adopted it. It's, all these places in it, but it's not really being used in that way because people don't want to spend something that's going to 10x or 100x. And you know what I mean? It just makes sense, right? So we just need to accept that. And it just goes to show how undervalued Bitcoin is right here. Once it gets, I think Michael Saylor has a thing where he said once 99.9% of the Bitcoin is mined in 2032, I think it is. Maybe then we'll have, because then at that point it's like, the vast majority of the Bitcoin that's ever going to exist exists now. So maybe we'll have some kind of equilibrium where it won't be quite as volatile at that point. I'm sure that we will still have volatility, but maybe the volatility will dampen enough that we can start to price things in Bitcoin, pay for things in Bitcoin a little bit more often. And it'll probably start with like big purchases. People are going to be, I guarantee you there's going to be companies that are just like, and it already is, but like it's going to become more of a thing of whatever it is, borrowing against your Bitcoin, banks and stuff like that, whether it be selling your real estate for Bitcoin. Like there's going to be so many more people that want to sell their real estate and for Bitcoin specifically. And there's going to be a lot of Bitcoiners that have held since whatever, 2015, 2011, that want to, that now want to, cash some in and buy a house for their family, because money is a means to an end. I think we need to remember that too. Bitcoin, the whole thing, like never sell your Bitcoin is, I think also a disservice, because it's like, dude, money is a means to an end. Money is a tool. We can't all be Saylor, who said he's just going to burn his keys when he dies, and just like, that's great. That's awesome. Thank you, Michael Saylor, for making our Bitcoin more valuable. But he also has billions of dollars to spend right now, right? So we all need, money is a means to an end. It's not everything, right? So eventually we need to use it to buy the things that we want in the future, to have a more comfortable life, to retire, whatever it is.
Yeah. I'm going to just take it back a tiny bit to the global reserve currency and global asset thing kind of potentially changing. I think it's super interesting to try to see, like, I'm not going to try to pretend to know exactly like what, Trump's whole entire, plan is, and whether it's 5D chess or whether they're, two steps forward or one step back or what that is. But I did see this sort of interesting analysis, and I think I have a tweet thread in my drafts that I have to put out about it. But it's like the chair of economic advisors, like Stephen Mirren or whatever his name is, like basically kind of came on and said that it seems like Trump admin wants to make it so America can have her cake and eat it too, meaning screw the Triffin dilemma. They kind of want this goal of, we're going to try to say the Triffin dilemma doesn't have to exist, meaning we can be the global reserve currency and not suffer these sort of trade imbalances that hollow out our middle class and our manufacturing base, because we can kill treasuries as the global reserve asset to some degree, but keep the dollar as the global reserve currency. I think you kind of mentioned that earlier. And it's like, seems like a very thin tightrope to walk, but I think stable coins, like you said, and Bitcoin potentially plays a super interesting role in if it becomes this global neutral reserve asset and takes over for U.S. Treasuries in that role, but the dollar can still maintain its role as the currency, the global reserve currency via stablecoins.
Yeah.
It's like this is sort of a fascinating potential new world order we could be entering into. That, of course, we believe Bitcoin, surfs on to become the new global reserve asset. Yeah, it's kind of wild.
Yeah, it's that's you said it perfectly. It's basically it's uncharted territory, right? We have no idea how this is going to turn out, and I think you're probably right that everyone can say, oh, this is all expert strategy, the art of the deal, everything he's doing, but he's kind of, I mean, everyone is flying by the seat of their pants with this, what we're going to do with money and the financial system going forward. It becomes very clear when you look into it pretty deeply and how everything works with the Fed and interest rates and monetary policy and quantitative easing. They have all these fancy words, but no one knows what the heck they're doing. It's just, you know what I mean? It's like, so it's like, you can be like, don't worry. Yeah. Trump's playing 5D chess. He's got it all figured out. But it is interesting, the element of stable coins and even like, the element of Bitcoin bonds, like Bit bonds coming out into adding something to that. Right. So we have no idea what's going to happen. One thing was for sure, and I know you had said is one of the things that we could talk about too, is I really do feel like the cycle, like the regular cycle theory of things, is because Bitcoin is just, it's such in a different class of when it was kind of that retail driven speculation. It's clear that it is with the massive corporations and investment firms and BlackRocks and of the world and strategies buying it, wanting it to be a reserve asset. The United States doing the same, other countries mining. It's become a global macroeconomic thing now. So one thing is for sure is that this time really is different. Every time, like now going forward, it's always going to be different because Bitcoin is changing. Of course, it's going to have similar maybe patterns to the price movements. It's still going to crash, I'm sure. It's still going to all that stuff. But I just think that if we think, a lot of people are like, oh, this is like exactly what happened in 2017. No, it's not. 2017 was very different than now. If you look at just who was buying Bitcoin, what was, how many Bitcoin there was, how much, it's just a totally different asset right now. So you can't really compare the two. So, I think a lot of people went into this cycle thinking, I myself did, because until history stops repeating itself, then something new happens, right? So everyone was expecting this cycle to be the same. We're going to have a blow off top and we're going to have another crash. And I think the first time where that kind of did change was obviously 2021 cycle. And obviously I think it's going to change again this time. I don't think we know what it's going to do next. It's such a part of the global economic system now, the global macro system now, that it's all I know, and this is what I tell people, it sounds crazy to people, but all I know is that it's going to be worth more in 5 years and 10 years and 20 years than it is now. That's all I know. And so it kind of gives a little bit of peace to how to, what to do with your money or how to invest or even just thinking about your future, retirement, all that stuff, right? It gives you a little bit of peace knowing that, you have that.
Yeah. Well, I know you are you make, content that's topical. And so you're paying attention every day. And I think sometimes I think it's funny how if we're on X and you're paying attention every day, you're kind of riding the emotional swings of things. But if you the crazy week we had last week or whatever, 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, where everything dropped and everything came back and everything dropped and everything came back.
So
it's like if you had just not seen any of that, if you had been on vacation in the woods for a week and just Bitcoin was 82,000 and then you went on vacation and then you came back and then Bitcoin was 82,000, you didn't know any of that. It's you're probably better off.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to look at how most people would see it, right? Because most people that don't pay attention to it every day, they'd probably, how often do you think they would check the price of Bitcoin if it was kind of on their radar, right? You're right. It would be once every couple of weeks or a month. And if someone like that saw it, a couple months ago, and then now they'd be like, oh, it's about the same. Nothing happened. But it's here when we're plugged into it, it's it's all over the place, right? So it's I've kind of semi orange pilled my sister and my mom this, just as we've entered this cycle after telling them about it for 5 years. And I try to tell that to my sister because she's obsessing about the price of it. And I'm honestly, I just love what I think Preston Pysh said at one time. The best thing you could ever do is don't even get as obsessed with Bitcoin as I've gotten and look into it so much and look at the price all the time. Just buy a bunch, however much you sit on it, forget about it for 5-10 years. That's literally the best thing you could do. It's so I try to tell her just buy a little bit every week or month. Don't even look at the price, but it's so hard to do because we obviously that's not the way our brains work. But
Yeah, you have to figure out how to balance the part that's fun about looking at it every day.
yeah,
The part that's stressful about looking at it every day.
yeah, it is. It is. It's like
Yeah.
it's tough because it's a part of my job now. I think before, when it was just a hobby, it was it definitely changes when I'm like, yeah, I'm plugged into what's happening in Bitcoin every day now. So it does. I do now. I have more of a sense of needing to like unplug on the weekends, take a break from my phone, take a break from the price, take a break from the news, and go touch grass, as they say, and play with my kids.
Yeah. There's like two things about the price that are interesting to me lately. One is the day we had where everyone was talking about decoupling, and then we kind of people got roasted for anybody who said decoupling got roasted because that ended very quickly. But I did do a video.
I was
about
lucky
that.
sorry, just to say on that, I was lucky that happened on a Friday.
Yeah.
If my video was going to be on Friday, I would have been like, decoupling, it's happening. And then I would have been like, oh man, because I would have been one of those people they were roasting. But by the time I had my video on Tuesday, it was like, okay, decoupling's not really a thing anymore.
Yeah, you got to kind of sift through the ashes of that. I wrote a script about it, and then I was like, all right, I'm gonna try to pivot this to make so it's not so much about the decoupling on that day, but it's still. I did think it was interesting that there was 1 day or 2 days where everything else tanked and Bitcoin didn't or went up a little bit, and I was like, this still feels like a sign of things changing. Like in the past, that would have been like stocks down 11%, Bitcoin down 30%. Like it did still feel to me like, well, this is different, even though it gave most of that away a couple days later. But then it came back, but I was like, that's interesting to me. So I want to get your thoughts on like the sort of decoupling and whether you think, stocks and bonds and Bitcoin and how that's kind of playing out. And then B, there's wondering if you also subscribe to the theory that gold is a leading indicator. So gold has been just going crazy.
Yeah.
And I know there's some people who historically will say, well, gold moves first. Gold sniffs it out first, whatever's happening in macro. And then Bitcoin follows.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a two-part question, but I'm interested in your thoughts on both.
Yeah, I think the whole idea that Bitcoin is like super tightly correlated with traditional assets is from like it's like when you're looking at it, just like what we're talking about. If you're looking at it every day, day to day, and like it's fluctuating with the news or with big things in the macro space, like the tariffs, you're going to see some correlation. But I think if you zoom out, it's already decorrelated from that stuff, right? Like it so clearly has. Even just you zoom out in just this year, and even though we had most of the run up was like after the election between November and December. I know it went up a little bit in January too, but even just this year, it's outperformed all the stocks and all that, So it's like the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq. So I think it's already decoupled, but that's probably. But I think but generally though, obviously it's going to still follow the trends of the market. Like, I mean, the biggest example that it's more decoupled than it was 5 years ago was the COVID crash, and it dropping. What was it, 75% during the liquidation during COVID. And then this time around with the, whatever you want to call it, the tariff trade war kind of panic, everything dumped way more. And Bitcoin only dumped, like 10% or something like that? Like it was already down a little bit, right? Before all that stuff kind of ramped up a little bit. I mean, it's only down 25% from its all-time high right now. So that's a signal right there. That's a big signal in my opinion. That there's a huge black swan, everything's burning. The global economic system is, we're going to have a recession, and Bitcoin's, just corrects just a tiny bit compared to what it did in 2020. Yeah. That is the signal that it's going to decouple, but it's going to be a slow, steady pace of decoupling. And I think that was very interesting. And I don't think it was nothing on that on last Friday. I think it was, or it was the Friday before maybe. Where it looked like, everything dumped up a lot and Bitcoin was steady. That was like, okay, something's going on here, right? And I think that was just another example of the decoupling that is happening in real time. But it's if you pay attention to things day to day, you're not necessarily it's not like it's all of a sudden every time the S&P and everything goes down, Bitcoin's going to go up, right? There's going to be some correlation, but over time, Bitcoin is already separating itself from everything else, and all you need to do is zoom out to see that.
100%, yeah. Do you think about that in the gold piece of like, does gold run first and then Bitcoin will follow?
Yeah, I mean,
historically, like global liquidity, right?
Yeah, historically it has, and I think there's definitely. I think gold and Bitcoin are going to start to get even more tightly correlated going forward. I think gold will probably always lead just because it has that history, and I mean, it's like when gold goes up, that's why it's super bullish right now because gold has been having an amazing run right now, and that's because gold is sniffing the changing, global monetary order that we're talking about, that Ray Dalio is talking about, that Scott Bessent's talking about, that everyone kind of that is like really plugged into the global macroeconomic thing that knows. So gold is sniffing that out. and I think that Bitcoin will follow. I don't know when that's going to be. Like the Bitcoin price and gold chart has looked bullish for a long time. We could, because we're kind of entering this more uncertain time of U.S. dollar dominance, stuff like that. I think gold's going to continue to go on quite a run. But I think eventually Bitcoin's going to completely, just like it has historically, outperform it and just go raw. That's another interesting thing about Bitcoin is that it's like gold can go steadily up for a long time. It's like all of a sudden you're like, whoa, gold's like $3,200 an ounce. It's amazing. But Bitcoin is mostly, this is a good thing to teach someone that's just getting into Bitcoin. 95% of the time, Bitcoin is boring and down. It's literally like 10 or 11 days of the year where it goes crazy parabolic. And I think it's almost like this psychology thing with people where that happens. And then all of a sudden, so it goes crazy parabolic like it did, last year, and it's 85K or 100K, whatever. And then you get used to it at that stage because it starts going boring for all it takes is a month or two of boring sideways. And you're like, it's like that meme of like, oh my gosh, Bitcoin's 105K or Bitcoin's 85K, celebrating. And then 2 weeks later, Bitcoin's 85K, you're upset, right? Because it's like that human psychology thing of just it being so in such a short constrained time period. So it's like, that's why you don't trade it, obviously, as well. Because how are you as a trader going to be able to time when those 10 days are going to be, when it's going to go parabolic? You can't. So that's why you just keep stacking and chill, that's it.
100%. The other meme that I always think of is the one where the guy's poking it with a stick and he's like, do something. Right?
Yeah.
And then the next is the green laser through his face. Like,
exactly.
That, yeah. And like you said, I think Saylor did a presentation, or I think that's where I saw it a year or two ago, where he talked about that thing of I think they tried to calculate out. This is like if you watch an American football game and you're like, well, there's only 11 minutes of actual action within a 60-minute game, right? Where Bitcoin, they calculated like Bitcoin has, like you said, 10 days a year where it really actually makes 90-something% of the gains or whatever. And that's why he said trading Bitcoin is a sign of lesser intellect, because it's like you're just playing with fire that you're just going to miss those 10 days. You're like, oops, I traded into stable coins for one day and I missed 40% gain.
Because on the surface, it seems like, and I got this from, even my sister when I was telling her about it, she was like, well, why wouldn't I just buy some and then sell it when it's high and then buy it more when it's low? It's just, it seems so easy, right? On the surface, you're like, well, of course, you just buy it when it's low and you sell it when it's high and then buy more when it's low again. But it's like, all it takes is, I'm sure you can ask any person that spends their time trading it too. All it takes is, a couple months into Bitcoin and you're going to go insane. It's going to make you go crazy.
Yeah. That's a very common thing, right? For people to say that, or they're posted on Reddit or X or whatever. Like, well, why don't you just trade it or sell it when it's at the top and then buy it back after it drops? Like, okay, just buy $5 of it and then go stare at your Robinhood app and then you go ahead, do it.
Try it. Yeah.
When it tops, sell it. And
turn your $5 into it.
This is harder.
Yeah, turn your $5 into 100,000. Let's see you do it.
Yeah, because you're staring at it one day and you're seeing a candle go up and you're like, oh, I should sell it. And then you sell. And then, oops, candle keeps going.
Yeah.
Or the opposite, like, oh, it was dropping, so I bought, and then, kept dropping.
Exactly. It always happens that way. Every time you buy, it's going to drop more. And every time, that's just the way it works. You're like, oh, I'm going to buy the dip. And then it dips another 10%. And you're like,
yeah. The only way around that, in my humble opinion, is you got to buy every dip that way.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was telling my sister. I was like, well, she's like, because she's trying to catch the ball. Oh, I want it to be in the 70s again, And I'm like, just buy the dip all the way down. Like, it's like, if it's a stair step down, keep buying. I mean, don't wait for it to bottom because you're going to miss it. So
yeah, anyway. You got to buy every dip. Therefore, you can always say, well, yeah, I bought that. I nailed the bottom of that dip. Right? Why? Because I was buying every single one on the way down.
Yeah, and that's why I almost like go back to like the idea that like Satoshi must have known something, or there's something else at play here with Bitcoin, because it's like just to have the design of like it almost like it took into account human psychology in a weird way, where it's like it knows, you know what I mean? It's like just the way that it's being adopted. Like people aren't just like aping into it all at once because all these things that we're talking about, right? Like the price is mostly boring and down, and then it goes up again, right? So there's just so many weird aspects of it that lean to that it's better to be a slow and steady climb up, right? You don't want it to move fast and break things. That's kind of not the Bitcoin mentality, right?
Gradually, then suddenly. I feel like I've mentioned Saylor too many times already in this thing, but the other thing is you say I'm buying the top forever, and like I love that one.
I love that one. I love that. Saylor's got that one on lockdown.
Yeah, like heck yeah, like when people are like, oh well, when are you gonna stop? Are you gonna sell when it gets at the top? Like no, I will proudly, when it hits 109K, I will proudly buy that too.
Yeah,
like
I because I remember buying it, like my original cycle when it was 69 or whatever, buying that top It's like now it's almost like I want to do that every time it tops again, just for like a commemorative, because I
Yeah.
know at one point that buy is going to be like, oh yeah, there you go, it's up. Just took
Yeah.
3-4 years.
Exactly. Every top's a local top.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Cool. Well, this is awesome. I could talk to you for hours. Super
Yeah.
fun. One thing I like to ask everybody at the end. So you make great content. So you're at Hurlburt on Twitter, on X. So if
Yeah.
anybody wants to follow, obviously follow Adam at Hurlburt on X. But most of all, go to the Swan Bitcoin channel on YouTube and watch the Pure Bitcoin Signal videos. Those are like twice a week. Like I said, they're super high signal, both for the big picture Bitcoin knowledge and then also to understand like what's going on in the day-to-day, week-to-week. But outside of your channel, is there something that you would recommend as a Bitcoin content for other people? Anything that you like or a person you like in the space?
I mean, I really like just for someone that I follow lately macro stuff. Obviously, like sometimes I don't understand what he's talking about half the time, but who's been amazing to try to figure out what he's talking about, and he's been spot on a lot, is Luke Roman. Is great. Obviously, Lynn Alden's amazing. I really like, also like, just for like because I don't really dig deep into on-chain stuff, but I really like James Checkmatey. He's got some really good analysis and stuff about stuff, because I'm never going to go deep into chain analysis. So I kind of use him as like, what's going on with kind of like the HODL waves and, when people bought and cost basis and stuff like that. So that's kind of interesting just from a research perspective for my videos. But, and then, yeah, I mean, I just think back to like my journey, right? It was like a lot of Bitcoiners, it was like bullish case for Bitcoin. So VJ, Bitcoin standard, and then price it tomorrow. That was like my 3 books where I was like, by the end of those, I was pretty orange pilled. I was like % there, you know what I mean? There was obviously a lot. And then the Saylor series, right? Michael Saylor's there's just so much amazing Bitcoin information and content out there. Like we live in just like such an amazing time for access to information that it's just incredible. So that's what I try to tell people. Like you just need to have an urge to want to learn about it, and that just like anything, right? If you want to learn about anything, it's right at your fingertips, and Bitcoin is no different. So people just need the incentive to reach out and want to learn about it, want to actually do the research, right? Which is hard to do, apparently.
Everyone will come to Bitcoin in their own time. I think
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool, man. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. This was awesome. And we'll keep watching on the Pure Bitcoin Signal videos. Those are dope. So thanks for everything you do out there, and appreciate you coming on,
Hey, man,
taking the time.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.